In the quiet town of Anchorage, Alaska, lived an unassuming baker named Robert Hansen. Robert had faced ridicule and rejection from women throughout his youth, leading him to find solace in hunting. This obsession with the hunt took a dark turn when he began to view women not as humans but as prey. Throughout the 1970s and early 80s, Robert abducted vulnerable women, often sex workers and exotic dancers, exploiting their marginalized status. He would release them into the Alaskan wilderness, where he stalked them throughout the dense forest, prolonging their terror before ending their lives with his rifle. The horrific game continued undetected until one victim, Cindy Paulson, escaped and brought the police to Robert's doorstep. Despite her harrowing account and the physical evidence she provided, Robert's standing in the community and his well-crafted alibi initially led to his release. However, the persistence of Alaska State Troopers and an FBI profiler named John Douglas revealed a collection of souvenirs from his victims and a map with X marks for each kill. Confronted with this evidence, Robert confessed to 17 murders and 30 sexual assaults. In 1984, he was sentenced to 461 years plus life without parole, despite only being charged with 4 of the 17 murders he confessed to. On January 16, 1987, 35-year-old Lita Sullivan was shot and killed when she opened the door to her Atlanta, Georgia home to a man carrying a box of roses. This was not a random act of violence, but a murder-for-hire scheme orchestrated by her husband, James Sullivan. They were in the middle of a contentious divorce, and millionaire James stood to lose a great deal of money in the settlement. The case remained unsolved for 13 years until the alleged hitman Philip Anthony Harwood was caught and confessed that James hired him to kill Lita. Philip was a truck driver who had met James while he was doing a moving job for him. Philip had gone to a flower shop on the day of the murder and gave someone named John money to purchase roses. He then drove John to Lita's home, and John was the one who took the flowers to the door, rang the bell, and shot her. Philip was adamant he was not the triggerman, but pleaded guilty in 2003 and was given a reduced sentence for his testimony against James. He was released from prison on May 25, 2018. James Sullivan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for his role in the murder. John was never proven to be a real person. Despite Philip's insistence, the real murderer has never been caught. On November 5, 1989, Betty Broderick snuck into her ex-husband Daniel Broderick's home and shot and killed him and his new wife Linda as they were sleeping. Betty and Daniel had met in college, had 4 children together, and lived in an affluent San Diego neighborhood. But as the years passed, Betty became convinced that Daniel was unfaithful, suspecting him of having an affair with his assistant Linda Colcana. This suspicion destroyed what was left of their relationship, and they divorced in 1985. Betty started acting out after the divorce. She left nasty messages for Daniel and even crashed her car into his house. Daniel got a restraining order against her and was awarded full custody of their children. After Daniel married Linda, Betty decided to take matters into her own hands. Armed with a revolver, she entered Daniel and Linda's home using her daughter's key, snuck into their bedroom, and fatally shot them as they slept. Linda was shot once in the head and once in the chest, killing her instantly. Daniel was shot once in the chest and died shortly afterward. Betty then went to the police and confessed to the murders. During her 2 trials, Betty claimed she was a victim of Daniel's prolonged emotional and psychological abuse, which had pushed her to the edge. The prosecution portrayed her as a woman overcome with jealousy and wanted vengeance for her failed marriage. The first trial resulted in a hung jury, but the second trial concluded with Betty being convicted of second-degree murder, leading to a 32 years to life sentence. On November 7, 2006, University of Miami defensive end Bryan Pata was shot to death outside his apartment. Bryan's girlfriend, Jada Brody, found him bleeding on the sidewalk close to his car and called 911. By the time paramedics arrived at 7:07 p.m., Bryan was dead from a gunshot wound to the head. The 22-year-old was projected to be selected in the following year's NFL draft. Bryan had been at practice prior to returning to his apartment, and one of his teammates reported hearing him having an angry phone conversation before leaving the locker room. He dropped some teammates off at their dorm before arriving home around 7 p.m. Jada said she was inside their apartment when she thought she heard an argument downstairs. She went to investigate, and that's when she found Bryan. Bryan's wallet, which contained $900 in cash, was still in his front pocket, so robbery did not seem to be the motive. The building's security cameras didn't capture the shooting, and police never found any witnesses, causing the case to go cold. In late 2021, former teammate Rashawn Jones was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The charge stemmed from a history of animosity between the two, with allegations of previous threats and altercations. Rashawn pleaded not guilty and is currently awaiting trial. On November 30th, 2019, 31-year-old Megan Montgomery was fatally shot by her estranged husband, 46-year-old Jason McIntosh, in a parking lot of a high school in Mountain Brook, Alabama. She had suffered multiple gunshot wounds to her back and head. The pair had been married for 2 years and had been involved in several domestic disputes leading up to Megan's death. On February 23, 2019, police responded to reports of a shooting at the couple's home. During this incident, Megan was shot in the arm. Although he was initially placed on leave from his position as a police officer, he resigned 2 days later. The investigation determined the couple were involved in a wrestling altercation where the gun had accidentally been discharged and no criminal charges were filed. However, Megan filed for a restraining order that would take away Jason's access to guns for a period of time, but when it was issued, no such stipulations were in there. On May 5, 2019, Jason was arrested on a third-degree domestic violence charge following a physical altercation with Megan and was released on bail the next day. 2 weeks later, Megan filed for divorce and moved out of their home. On the night of her murder, Megan had been bonding with some new friends at an oyster bar when Jason appeared out of nowhere. Security footage showed them leaving the bar together with Jason gripping Megan's shoulders. Since these were new friends, they didn't know the context and thought that Megan might have been doing something behind her husband's back, so they didn't object to her leaving with him. After the murder, Jason surrendered to police and was formally charged with capital murder. Megan's mother, Suzanne, stated that her daughter began dying on July 23, 2017, which was the date Megan met Jason. She said her daughter's relationship was like a frog not realizing it was being boiled to death because the temperature increased slowly. Jason decided to plead guilty for a reduced charge and was sentenced to 30 years in prison with a minimum of 25.5 years before parole eligibility.